I'm all set, Ramesh.
Just have a minute to go.
Sure.
Good evening and a very warm welcome to everyone to what is the sixth in the We Lead Conversation series. And this time is exclusive. Almost all our webinars and our conversations are exclusive. But here today we're talking about Vivekananda and his enduring message. And we're specifically talking to someone who took this message to heart and actually made an impact on the ground and continues to make an impact on the ground. So it's planned as a freewheeling conversation. So there's not much preparation that's gone into the questions and as well into the possible answers. We wanted it that way. So that's how this is going to be. Some of you have already sent your questions in. So we will take those questions. I've made a note of those questions and I ask them as part of this conversation. But if you still have questions at the end, we could always have it at the end of this about 15-20 minutes at the end of the program. So since there are quite a few people, I'll quickly introduce We Lead. The Vivekananda Institute for Leadership Development, We Lead, is an initiative of the Swami Vivekananda Youth Movement, SVYM. We Lead's mission is developing human and social capital for nation building by enhancing the potential of individuals and institutions across the development sector. And in order to do that, We Lead engages across 4 sectors, that is the government, NGOs, corporate, youth, and community. Many of you who have joined us here know about today's speaker, but very briefly, Dr. R. Balasubramaniam, having embarked on his journey in the development sector by living and working for several years among remote forest-based communities in the southern Indian district of Mysuru, Dr. R. Balasubramaniam, Dr. Balu, is a widely respected development activist, leadership trainer, thinker, and has a unique ability to combine a very extensive experience in the development sector while also studying and teaching at the world's leading schools of policy and development, including Harvard and Cornell. He has been a special investigator for the Lokayukta, in addition to holding membership and consulting positions in government bodies, commissions, academic boards, and development agencies, including the World Bank. He is a visiting professor at Cornell and at IIT Delhi, India, and has also served as the professor and head of the Vivekananda Chair of the University of Mysore twice. Dr. Balu, the founder of SVYM and GRAM, embodies a rare blend of grassroots and macro perspectives on development and policy through his multifaceted experience of more than 3 decades. 2 of his books, I the Citizen and Voices from the Grassroots, and very soon there will be another book that will be coming out, present an alternate approach to human development with the focus on engaging with communities and what he likes to call addressing voice poverty. Dr. Balu writes regularly his columns both in Kannada and English in popular dailies, online portals as well. And he also has a very popular blog, which you can follow at rbalu.com. It's a pleasure. It's a conversation that I wanted to have for a long time. Dr. Balu, thank you for joining us today. And this is something that I want to do, and I can see that several want to do because we already, quite a few participants also already connected on YouTube as well. So thank you for doing what I'll do is I'll jump straight into it with the first question before I even and one of the things that I have read is your book Swami Vivekananda As I See Him. I think the operative word is as I see him. It's not like as I saw him, which is it's a very important distinction that is made, where you talk about several aspects of the Swamiji's life, including his trials, tribulations. But as I read it, I distinctly get the impression that you see yourself through him, where the difficulties, the challenges that you have gone through. So would that be a fair statement to make, and your thoughts on that? Maybe we could start with that.
First of all, thank you, Ramesh, for having me in this conversation. talking about Swami Vivekananda is a real bonus for me because it sort of re-inspires and recharges me, gives me the energy that only a personality like Vivekananda can give anybody. So it's always nice to talk about him. Now, coming back to the specific question that you asked me about the book Swami Vivekananda as I see him, well, it's understanding Vivekananda. It's not easy. He's a very complex personality. Sometimes his message looks very simple. At one reading, you feel that you have got to know him, but suddenly at another reading, you feel that you're just scratching the surface. And so when I first wrote it, I realized that there are a lot of literature and material on Swami Vivekananda, and each of us see him in different ways. When I used to talk to monks, they mostly saw him as a monk or the person who established the Ramakrishna mission. When I spoke to some leading personalities who were inspired by him and learned what he meant to them, they saw him as something a nationalist, inspiring them to do national service. And I look at my own life. When I first read him, when I was 17 when I first read him. And at that time, I saw him more as somebody who inspired me to give up mainstream careers as an young man, care about this country, worship this country, and just go out there and do what I could for this country. So at that time, it was a message of action, of just getting out there and doing something. I never really understood what to do, but reading him, I felt that you got to do something. So when I started writing about him, I realized that whatever I write is going to be an inadequate, incomplete description of this enormous personality. It's something like I write in the preface of the book, as some of you might have read, is that it's like five blind people describing the elephant, right? We believe what we are touching is the absolute truth. We believe that it's a trunk of a tree or the brush of a feels like a brush, all this kind of conception that we get. But then I realized, I keep reading his works. It's something which has been my lifelong accompaniment for me. But every time I've read him, I started reading him seriously in the year 1982. And so it's now 38, 39 years since I've started understanding him, reading him, and trying to relive his message. And I realized that understanding him is a direct correlation between our evolution. Our ability to understand him is what evolves over time. His message is constant. His message is universal. His message is absolute truth, the way I see it. But our ability to understand the truth, see the truth, live by the truth, and then and experience it in a way which is what Swami Vivekananda might have wanted is completely different. Like Krishna telling Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita that you can hear me for all I care, but if you don't try it out, you're never going to understand whether this message is valid or not. And if you think it's invalid, throw it out of the door. Vivekananda makes something like that in his own understanding, in his own messages. He says, just live it. And there's a popular book, a collection of his writings, where portions of what he spoke about himself, right? And it's Vivekananda on himself is a book's title. And in that, there are several places where he mentions about how difficult it is going to be for us to live his message. He says that I might have just come and gone, but then my message will take 2000 years to deconstruct and understand. And I believe as people evolve and deconstruct him, they will see him in different ways. And therefore, I thought it has to be continuous tense. Though the book is static, it is in one point of time, but it is as I saw him at that point of time. So it is a continuous process. I continue to see him today. If I were to rewrite that book today, it will possibly be a completely different way of looking at him. Today, I have sort of deconstructed him in multiple things that I do work in my own life. So the second part of your question was, do I see myself in a different way through him? It's a little big ask, but I try. Whatever I have done, whether it's in the space of...
To clarify, I think I said that, do you see, particularly with respect to, because I get that distinct impression, the trials and tribulations that he goes through, and some of the things that you mentioned, tends to give me that feeling.
I put it, it's a coincidence, but more importantly, I will say what gave me the strength to renegotiate my life and existence despite the trials and tribulations was my deep conviction in Swami Vivekananda and his message. In one sentence, I'll just like to quote two sentences of his, which has stood by me throughout till now. One place he says, all good work has to go through three stages. The first he says is ridicule. And so when people ridiculed me, I felt like giving up. But then somehow my mind got drawn to this inspirational quote and said, well, that is what it's supposed to be, right? Vivekananda says, you will be ridiculed if you go start doing good work. So I sort of told myself, I must be doing good work. And then he says, if you continue doing it, then comes a phase of opposition. I've been beaten up, I've been arrested, you have all the fun and a lot of trials and tribulations in its own way. Those are all visible physical trials, the enormous humiliation, the amount of subjective insults that you get and the way you look at life. I think they were all the oppositions in their own way. But, as I went on, I realized opposition from the external world is one thing, but true understanding of Vivekananda is when I really understood that your own inner self opposes what you do. You start constantly trying to convince yourself that this is not the life you want. It's all meaningless. Give up and go join the conformist life. And so the struggle that I had within my own self, and I could endure that struggle. A lot of people ask me, why are you still doing this after so many years? I could endure that struggle mainly because I understood my own inner self during its process of evolution as something which can oppose you. And Swamiji says, final phase is acceptance. Very fact we can have conversations like this. People invite me to talk, is that. Now, how do all my thinking is based on what I owe everything to Swami Vivekananda. For me, I'm nobody without Vivekananda and this message. And so whether it is my understanding of economics or my understanding of development, my understanding of building human and social capital, or my understanding of leadership, to me, every message I see this through the message of Swami Vivekananda. So in that sense, I continue to see him, and what you said is also true in that sense.
Okay, I think that's a great answer in terms of, because I think one of the key messages that at least we got is that, you have to see Vivekananda as not something as a personality, but rather an idea that lives long after the physical person himself is not there.
Reiterating it, Swami Vivekananda is not an idol. It is not God. It is not. It's not. It's something beyond that. It is the very purpose of human existence. I would say a purpose of meaningful human existence. And once you get inspired by that power of Swamiji, you become the Vivekananda that he wants you to be. And I leave it at
that. Okay. I think one of the things that has, you have talked about this with me also when we've had our, offline conversation and other things. One of the things is that Swami Vivekananda had this habit of, spent an entire phase where he was a parivrajaka, a wandering mendicant, traveling and, seeing India in that sense, or perhaps even seeing himself through India, or getting to know himself better. And it is something that you have done. I don't see much of it mentioned in most of your books, but I know for a fact that, it's not easy. Sometimes you've just walked away with absolutely nothing other than, just a bag and perhaps just about enough money for one-way bus ticket or something. So how's that been? So how has that been? For some, it might, when that happened through that phase, for some it would have been, this is just a whim on which he's going. Or how has it changed? What has been the response from people? How has that shaped your thinking? And what are the lessons that you have for doing something like that from that?
Those are all things in one phase of my life, and a phase of my life where I was extremely restless. I was driven by the inspiration that Swamiji's message can give, but I really didn't know what to do with that inspiration. It's something like you have a toolkit, but you don't know how to use the toolkit, right? You're filled with passion, energy, and you want to pour it out into something that you believe is important, because you believe in the messenger who gave the message to you. But then at some point of time, you really don't know how to do it, how to break it down into specific nuts and bolts, and what do you do with it? It's like an enormous dynamo inside you, but the energy has to come out. And during those phases of restlessness, I was personally lucky that I had an extraordinary guru. Swami Achalanji was his name, who guided me through a lot of my foundational thinking and possibly gave me the toolkit to which I could interpret Swami Vivekananda himself. And so when I felt that restlessness going beyond a particular level of absorption and tolerance, I would do it for two reasons. One is a blind conviction that there would be a higher power, higher force, call him whatever name you want. I would call it Vivekananda, somebody else may call it Allah or Krishna, depending on what they want. So for me, it was essentially an opportunity to just discover my true self. And in that restlessness, express a physicality of the restlessness by just wandering around and traveling. But though it would look like wandering around, I would be intensely composed, calm, and not worry about any of the constraints that known environment would give on me. Like if it is like you're sitting at home or you're sitting in your workplace, everybody knows you and there's a stereotype about you and people expect you to behave in a particular way. It essentially curtails freedom. I think it curtails physical and emotional and intellectual freedom, and therefore spiritual freedom too. So you want an expression of the true self, and in that search, hunger for the true self, you just go around. And that's exactly what I tried doing. And so I would just have enough money and a change of clothing in my bag and not care where I go. I would just divide that amount by half and get into the bus and go wherever the bus charge would take me, whichever bus I saw. I wouldn't even know about the place because the place was not important. It was more like the process. The journey was more important than the destination. And many times the destination, possibly subconsciously, I would choose a temple town or something like that. And so stay there, not worry about who will feed me, where will I stay. And somehow magically those things would be taken care. You know, it's very strange in life. When you really don't focus on those, the smallities of life, small things of life, they actually get taken care. So those phases, apart from discovering my own restlessness and the way to address the restlessness, I also discovered strangely the power of the Almighty, if you can call it that, indescribable feeling of being taken care of. And what it does to you is it gives you an enormous ability to surrender. Now, surrender is not a negative connotation. A lot of people think in surrender lies helplessness. But I think real evolution lies in the fact that you can surrender, just give up everything. And it's not really yours to give up, but still just being there, accepting what comes next without any concern. I think those kind of visits gave me that freedom. And when it comes to Vivekananda, I think for him, maybe in a sense, it was his own self-discovery as far as, and his possible experimentation, the different spiritual disciplines that he had. He met several people during these journeys. And more importantly, it was also an opportunity for him to communicate to a large number of people. We lived in the days where physical communication was really important. And people like Vivekananda, you had to be physically communicating for the power that you could feel. Even today, without him physically there or only through his books, etc., we get so much of power. Imagine if he were being there. And so I think that is an opportunity for him to meet a huge cross-section of people, right? And so he met kings, he met people on the street, people on the footpath. He met people who traditionally see as indulging in what today's society would call conveniently as immoral, whatever. He just didn't care. He just met all kinds of people. He met nobody. He stayed in the forest. He was nearly attacked by a tiger. So his life unfolds as a process where he understood the external world in its completeness as much as he tried to understand himself in his completeness. And I think that's the message we got to pick from his wandering life. His wandering life is not really wandering. That's physical sense. But his wandering life is actually capturing, distilling out the experiences and putting it together. And that's what you see the way he describes what young people should be doing for this country.
I'll just take off from what you said right now, because I think this is a question I think I see quite a few young people who've logged in. Do you think, at least this is my feeling, I think the youngsters today, there are several who lead. Do you think some of them, actually should get out of the cloistered kind of lives they tend to lead, and take this up as some sort of a challenge? Actually, what do you say in terms of surrendering, and just people want to control the outcomes? Is that something that you look at only what you can do, what you can control, and not worry about the outcomes? So how do you think something like that can actually practically be applied for youngsters? I mean, that's something that...
I think today's young people have an enormous advantage. And to me, COVID crisis is the greatest blessing they have received. Beyond the challenge of the health systems, beyond the challenge of somebody whom we love and know might have the disease or somebody might have died. I'm not denying all the negative sorrow and the tragedy that it unfolds, but it's an opportunity for young people. And in this, instead of suffering through the word lockdown is such a negative construct. I think it's an opening up. If you really understand lockdown in its true sense, I would say it as an opening up, an opportunity where young people today, they've all trained themselves to live in company all the time without recognizing that essentially they're still alone in the company. But this is an opportunity for them to enjoy the company of loneliness, company of just being alone, company of the divine presence with you all the time. You can feel it when you're able to still your mind, quieten it, stop the noisy chatter that's happening in your mind all the time, and then give yourself the opportunity to fine tune your antenna to feel the enormity of that presence. And when I said surrender, I think this is something, surrender gives you the freedom to experiment. If you think you're in control, you want to do it in a particular way because that is what your life has taught you, or your university education has given you, or competence has given you an illusory feeling of power and control in doing something a particular way. The moment you surrender, you give yourself the freedom to be vulnerable, you give yourself the freedom to be humble, to acquire new knowledge, and you give yourself the opportunity to experiment. I think today's young people need the power of experimentation and enterprise. And if they can take a message from Swami Vivekananda, I think they need to take this message. Swamiji was always a constant experimenter. Swamiji was a sponge of absorbing knowledge from all different kinds. Swamiji was somebody who was willing to try out the most untried things. Like, crossing the ocean and going to United States was itself something which sannyasis were not supposed to do. They're forbidden to do, right? He would do all these wonderful things because he gave himself the freedom to experiment. So just one message, if you can take of Swamiji, take the message of freedom combined with fearlessness. I think Abhihi, Abhihi, Abhihi were three strong words that Vivekananda told. Be fearless. You want to be an entrepreneur and make money? Be fearless. You want to be an entrepreneur and test out new areas of approaches and work? Be fearless. Give yourself the freedom to try it out. So I think if the young of today, they don't have to worry about God, spirituality, anything. If they can just understand, internalize, and live the message of freedom and fearlessness, that is spirituality in action. That is Vivekananda and his message in action.
Okay, that leads me to a question which is connected to this, and then where you at a particular point in time, I mean, you responded to Swami Vivekananda's clarion call to the youth. Swami Vivekananda Youth Movement is clearly a response to how Vivekananda impacted you at a particular point in time during your life. Do you want to share some of that as well? How this whole thing happened? I mean, you two had, you two were leading. Perhaps you two were leading a normal life, and then you thought, you had to segue into something like this. There must have been something that triggered, and perhaps some of the youth can take something from there.
The question I was hoping you would not ask because, but it's still a story I don't get tired of telling. I was not leading a normal life. I was leading a monotonous, boring life in a sense. That's what everybody lives. We call it normal. We somehow make the boring and monotonous normal. I'm actually leading a normal life now. A real normal life for a human being, the way Vivekananda says it, is a life lived for others. Only that is normal. Why do you even make anything else normal? The life lived for yourself is such a monotonous, dreary, dead life, in my opinion. It's not even living. It's actually dying. So I was possibly dying. I started living after I discovered Vivekananda. That's why I put it. Discovery was accidental. And I was no different from any other young, middle-class young boy of city of Bangalore. That's where I was born and brought up. And the typical middle-class aspirations, you either become a doctor or you become an engineer. And I had, those days there were no entrance exams. And I had 99.67% in my PCM. And I thought 1 mark short of the highest you could get. I thought I could get into any school. I didn't get into IIT. I wanted to get into IIT, but maybe IIT didn't want me there, so I didn't get in there. It's an irony of fate that I'm able to teach at IIT Delhi now, but still, those days I wasn't admitted. And so I got into what we call RECs, like Regional Engineering College at Surathkal. That's the year they actually, I think 1 year before or just that year, they introduced computer science. And there's only one seat for general merit, and I was qualified as waiting list 1. The fellow with 100% marks, he was actually my classmate. He got the seat. So I was unlucky there. So I finally got so disgusted. I said, well, I haven't got what I wanted. I didn't get into IIT. I didn't get into what college I thought and branch I wanted. So let me just do something. And so I chose mechanical engineering in BMS College in Bangalore. BMS is an engineering college in Gandhi Bazaar. And if some of you know Bangalore, it's beside the Ramakrishna Mission. And the first day was possibly a day which has changed my life for good. I was so badly ragged on that day. Ragging was beautiful those days because they really, in a sense, made a mockery of your life, but they also possibly gave you the strength to live it further on. But to me, it was so bad that I never had the courage to go back to college the next day. But you got to go somewhere, right? You're middle class. Your parents are not going to let you go stay at home. You don't have enough money to go sit in a theater every day. So I used to have a cycle. As I was cycling by, I went up to college, didn't have the courage to go inside, thought let me just cycle for some time, go back home. I saw the Ramakrishna Mission, gates open, lovely green campus, beautiful. So I just went in, spent some time, loitered around, Did that for 2, 3 days. I think the monks, the brahmacharis there must have started suspecting that what is this young man doing here? He must have come to steal some fruits or whatever. So just to look serious and just to look very, concerned about understanding Vivekananda and Ramakrishna, I went and sat in the library in the Bangalore Ramakrishna Mission. It's close to the gate. Sat there for a day or two and started thinking, you can't just simply sit there, right? You at least got to pretend to read the books. And what else do you pretend to read in a Ramakrishna Mission? You pretend to read books by Vivekananda. So those were the days when Swamiji's works came in 8 volumes. I started reading those volumes, and slowly people saw me reading seriously, and they took me seriously. I would be there till the door, get there when the door opened for the library, leave during lunchtime, come back. The monks would sometimes invite me for lunch. Possibly they thought a possible potential candidate for monkhood, but destiny willed otherwise, I think. So 2 books, to cut a long story short, very small books. And I believe every young man around the world, if not definitely in India, should read those books. We waste our time in reading so many meaningless things, but 2 small books. One was called His Call to the Nation. The other was called To the Youth of India. I think that changed my life. That gave me meaning. In that, Swamiji says, he gives a call, go from village to village, go from the fisherman's hut to the cobbler's grove. And the whole sentence goes that way. And he said, that is what you need to do, not sit in an urban area. It is a call to young people of this country, educated young people, to give up their lives for something more meaningful. In a letter to the Mysore Maharaja, Swami Vivekananda writes, and I think there lies the message for everybody in this world. He writes it so beautifully, and he says, the vanities of life are transient. That is normal life, what you said, right? That is not for me normal. That is the boring, monotonous life. It's very transient. It just comes and goes. The transient keeps changing. But he says, he alone lives who lives for others. The rest are more dead than alive. And remember, a monk, a mendicant writing to the Maharaja of Mysore, and those days a great Maharaja, and somebody who sponsored his trip to the US, telling him, hey, you know what, your life is useless if you don't live it for others. And I think statements like that, or statements like, I do not believe in a God or religion which cannot wipe away the widow's tears or bring a piece of bread to the orphan's mouth. What power in that statement? To me, I thought, that is the God I want. That is the religion I have to discover. That is what Swamiji's message to me meant. I said, I got to find this man's message. And he said, purity, patience, perseverance. These are 3 qualities you need to have. It looks like 3 simple words. I can only tell you, after so many years of trying to live them, you're only trying to live them. That is spiritual evolution and growth. You're constantly trying. The trying is tapasya. That is the sadhana. And I don't think any of us can have a destination for purity, patience, and perseverance. It keeps happening and growing all the time. And that changed my life. And that gave me meaning. And the day I said, I'm going to do something useful, people may think it's just a story, but to me, I come home, I had a telegram saying, join Mysore Medical College immediately. I didn't have a good percentage for my PCB, 93 or something. But I went to Mysore 2 months late. I joined the course 2 months late. That was history. And year after that, I couldn't bear it any longer. I said, I have to do something. And that's how it all started. So 1982 was my first real brush with Swamiji and his message. 1984 was the founding of the Swami Vivekananda movement. And every step that I have taken in life, I believe that there is this inner voice. And my book, like you said, just to recapture that, Swami Vivekananda, as I see him, is the way I titled the book. But I try to live my life feeling that Swami Vivekananda is constantly seeing me, and I better live up to that image. That's how I try to modulate what I live with. So that is the story of how Swamiji changed my life.
And I'm sure, I think it will change a few lives too. Because I think it's a very nice story. That's why I brought it up. You talk of the 3 H's. That's something that even Swami Vivekananda talked about it. But I've seen you, model it in terms of actual action on the ground. So the head, the heart, and the hands. This one. So that is something I think that has a direct relevance to how what Swami Vivekananda said can be brought into action. So if you could elaborate on what you actually mean on the 3 H's of bringing his message to action. If you could articulate on that.
I think there are four real domains. Like, these are the theories that influence my theory of human capital, etc. And so I believe that everything is from Vivekananda to me. If people credit me with having written about it or speaking about it, it's just their limited understanding of where my inspiration comes from. So when Swamiji says heart, heart to feel, the head to think, and the hands to work, I see two parallels that guided my life. One in the space of human development. When I say human capital, I talk of four domains. I talk about the physical domain, the cognitive domain, the emotional domain, and the spiritual domain. And that's what Vivekananda said. He said, first have the heart to feel. He said, feel, my children, feel. Feel till you feel for the poor, the marginalized, the downtrodden, and feel till you think your heart will stop and you'll fall down dead. And then will come indomitable power, he says. So that sense of wanting to serve has to be born out of intense feeling to do something. Many of us feel, but we stop there. We don't take it to the next step. Now, feel comes from the emotive part of it, the heart. The head is the cognitive part. Feeling and acting is stupid. Acting without thinking is absolutely stupid. And Vivekananda reminds us that don't just simply stupid and jump into action without even thinking. So he gives you the space. Viktor Frankl in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, writes it so beautifully. He says, between feeling and thought, right in the brain, the basal part of the brain, when you have a stimulus, between stimulus and response, there is a small micro space, space of time, right? It's a very small space of time. In that space, he says, lies the freedom for you to act. That can be a scientist describing it, but Vivekananda says it beautifully. He says, hard to feel, and don't jump into action. Think about it, cogitate about it. Ask yourself, what do I do to solve this problem? How do I solve it? What are the tools I use? What are the competences I acquire? Think about it. Today's young people need to ask themselves that question. I find the young going in a direction which is either forced by their parents or they simply think this is the right direction. Can they stop and listen to their heart and ask themselves, what do I really want in life? You want to be a painter? Go paint. You want to just be a homemaker? Go be it. You want to be a farmer? Go be it. Ask yourself, damn it, what you want to be in life. But in that question of what you want to be, say, whatever I want to be should be something which will be useful to others around me. Whether it's my son or any young people I meet, I say only two questions. Ask yourself, what will make me happy in that sense, right? And what will make others around me happy? If the answer, even one of this question is not fulfilled, I don't think you'll have a meaningful life. It's going to be a disgruntled life forever. People mistakenly think having $1 million, having $1 billion will make them happy. I'm not saying that it will be transiently happy, but then is that happiness? So hard to feel, then hit to think, but then you got to go do it yourself. You cannot expect somebody else to do this job. That's what Vivekananda said. Real karma yoga and evolution is living that experience by actual action. And then you may make mistakes, and that's where you learn. All this, if it is done the action is done in an unconditional, non-transactional way, completely selflessly, that is a spiritual domain. So to me, heart, body, mind, and soul is a message that is embedded in Swamiji's message. In the work of work, that's how I looked at it, in human development. In the space of leadership, and that's what I work a lot today on, I look at leadership as just three things in real sense. It is motivation, strategy, and action. Motivation comes from the heart to feel. Strategy comes from the head to think. Action comes from the hands to work. And that is leadership. And that's all that matters to you, right? Yeah. So for me, heart, head, and hands are the very fundamental of everything that guides my life.
Okay. One of the things about Swami Vivekananda is that he was many personalities in one person. I mean, there are many personalities in one person. So if you were to see him in today's context, from the context of the nation and from the perspective of an individual seeker, how do you see Vivekananda today from these two contextual viewpoints?
See, to me today, if you look at the world of management, if you look at the works of Peter Senge and the Fifth Discipline and all this, several westernized narratives of management and leadership, and some of the good ones essentially are cheap imitations of Advaita, in my opinion, but that's my personal opinion. I believe that real existence is the ability to synthesize and live a world where synthesized wholesomeness is what is expressed by human experience. The human experience is an expression of the synthesis, right? And Vivekananda was an extraordinary symbol of the synthesis. He could not only synthesize science and spirituality, he could not only synthesize external nature and control of internal nature, he could not only synthesize Western thinking with Eastern life, he could not only synthesize different religions, he was a master synthesizer, in my opinion. What the nation needs today is somebody who can synthesize like that. Swamiji saw similarities amongst people. Today's leadership sees differences amongst people and capitalize on the differences. Today's world is polarizing. Swamiji was synthesizing. I think if Vivekananda were to be alive today in a physical spirit, his job would have been to inspire all of us. We as a nation, if we truly believe in him and his faith, if we truly celebrate the international youth today, the best way to celebrate for the young of this country is not to have January 12th and wear a t-shirt and a cap with photograph of Vivekananda. It is to live this message of synthesis. It is to live this message of universal acceptance. Because if you don't synthesize, you can't accept. And that's the power of Swamiji's message. The next lesson is, he never spoke of tolerance as in high quality. Today, Western science talks of, psychologists talk of tolerance. It's not tolerance, Swamiji said. He says, people tolerate your fellow brothers is blasphemy, he says. It is acceptance. Go beyond tolerance. What the world needs today is acceptance. I need to accept people who don't agree with me. I need to accept people who don't believe in my ideologies. I need to accept people who are different political views. I need to accept people who are different religious views. It doesn't matter to me. Can I be a true Hindu and still accept the whole world? That is the message of Swami Vivekananda. When he said, I'm proud to be a Hindu, that is the Hinduism that he spoke about, where we accept everybody for what they are. It is their personal choice to be what they are. It's my personal choice to be what I am, and to respect each other and give them the space to be that without being critical of each other. Today's world has started a world narrative of hatred and polarization. Vivekananda is the best answer to this world today. So I think it's never a situation than today to understand the relevance of Swamiji and this message. And that is exactly what we want.
There is also this argument that is made, and this is a real segue. I'm going off into in one sense into a tangent. There is an argument that is often made that Swami Vivekananda wouldn't have been as recognized, as famous, if he hadn't made that famous trip to the US and the Chicago talk hadn't happened. Now, that is one part of the question. That is one part of the question. The second is, what are your thoughts on that, and specifically on that? Because I don't believe in that. Let me also clarify my stand on that. The other thing is that I mean, you're also a frequent visitor to the US of A. So what are the parallels there?
Swami Vivekananda went to the United States. We got to see the context of his visit to the United States. His context of visiting the United States was in 1890s, right? And those were the time when we lived a world of slavishness. We were slaves in a sense, though we were supposed to be subjects of a crown. We were essentially people who were being manipulated and used. And to break, and we had this fascination of everything West, the fascination for the white skin, so-called fair and lovely. That's what we all believe in, right? And so if Swamiji was a master strategist, I believe the two great strategists of India were Mahatma Gandhi and Swami Vivekananda. And in this great strategization, if Swamiji's innate spirituality would have made him great in India too. But his greatness is greatness only when the rest of the world accepts it as great, right? And if you could go to the United States and announce yourself, it may not be increasingly today, it's becoming less relevant, but whether you agree with me or I agree with you, in the international context, the United States sets the narrative, the global narrative. Even of what not to do, they're seeming to set the global narrative today, whether we like it or not. But forget what to do. So I would just feel that Swamiji's message and relevance got amplified much faster and much louder because of his visit to the United States. I just want to quote one book, a favorite book of mine. It has been a great treat for me to have met that author and discussed with her. She had no idea who Swami Vivekananda was. Elena Stark is her name. And she's a historian who worked in the world of American history, and that is a PhD. So during her research, she discovered something very fascinatingly strange. Very few of us know this. And in what she discovered was something happened in the United States between 1890 and 1900, subsequently onwards. The watershed movement, she says, is 93 onwards. And she was wondering what could have changed. And she went around and discovered where all the changes happened. She mapped it. She started going around, and Eleanor, O-R is the E-L-E-A-N-A-O-R. And her discovery is captured in a book called, about Swami Vivekananda, The Gift Unopened, right? It's a beautiful title. She says, the most priceless gift that anybody could get and God could give was given to the United States of America. And the real challenge is the Americans have still not opened it. But if Elena Stark, I used to joke with her and say, even we Indians haven't fully opened Vivekananda. We're all discovering him all the time. And in that book, she writes one sentence. It's so powerful to me, it's so meaningful. She says, if Christopher Columbus can be credited with discovering the land of America, it is Swami Vivekananda who gave her the soul. And look at the beauty of that statement. I've gone and stayed in a place called Ridgely Manor in upstate New York, which is now thankfully come into the possession of the Ramakrishna Mission there. A place where Vivekananda lived and the tree under which he meditated. Just going and standing there, you feel you reconnected with Swami Vivekananda. He's had such extraordinary situations there, whether it's the Thousand Island Park or whether it is his entire exposition of the inspired talks, which is captured and brought to us as a book. The power of Swamiji is, I think you need a space, you need an ecosystem in which you can express yourself. And I think America provided that ecosystem to him. And that is how, maybe at that time in the colonized phase of India, we might not have had the ecosystem in which we might have discovered Vivekananda the way America discovered it. So it was a segue for us. And my visits, I've had this challenge. Why do I teach in the United States? Why do I keep going there? Why do I keep interacting with a lot of young people? I do believe in what Vivekananda said. We are all petty in our thinking. Vivekananda says it so beautifully. As you evolve, he says, it's very nice. Vivekananda talks about selfishness as a sin. He talks about selflessness as an expansion. But he says, begin with yourself. It's okay to be selfish. I need to have food to eat, clothes to wear, have a degree. Start with yourself. And as you evolve, start expanding your circle, he says. The immediate circle is my family. Take care of that. Then your larger construct of your neighbors, your street, your town, your taluk, your district, your state. It's all very parochial in a sense, right? But in an absolute sense, it's parochial. But in an expansive sense, Swamiji says, that is growth, that is life. Keep expanding. My country. And after a phase when you're evolved enough, even my country is a limitation. But you got to reach that stage. It's a very incremental stage. And then say, my world. And then when you say my world, the world may not be ready to accept you. So you are going to a world which accepts you, receives you, understands you, appreciates you. And I found it very strange. As much as Swami Vivekananda got to be known after 1893, tragically, my engagement with the United States is the highest in the last decade, from 2009-10 onward, from my days at Harvard, post-Harvard days. And my acceptance within India also seems to be highest in the last decade. And it's tragic, but it's real. And so I believe in global citizenship. I believe that boundaries cannot separate us. I believe ideas have no boundaries, and we need to rediscover this one world which unites us. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam has to be lived. And this message can be taken only when you take it to countries like the United States, where I think the level of understanding, especially in academic environments, is definitely more freer and more welcoming of such diverse thoughts. And to me, whether it's the world of leadership or whether it's the world of development, I speak from the narrative of Vivekananda. I speak from the narrative of the Indian scriptures. What I teach is all based on the civilizational foundation that India gave me. And I find the acceptance very high, sometimes higher than what I get in India itself. And so if at all it's a parallel, I don't know if it's a parallel, but it's a good observation. Thank you.
A question that I have, do you think the youth of today are as inspired or could be as inspired as you were during the youth? Do you often think that there are too many distractions and attractions that make it difficult? For example, I personally think, reading and reflection are both victims of today's digital age. So also single tasking. People take pride in multitasking. Razor sharp focus is not something that people, and focusing only on the task at hand. Living in the present. These are things that no longer seem to be things that people aspire to, and not something that the youth can clearly connect to. Is what is my feeling. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you think?
I think as much as we can blame that there's several distractions for young people today, I feel there's no single attraction for them. And that's also a problem. But there are too many things that distracts them. There is one thing which attracts them. I wish people would even stay attracted to each other at least. But even that has become so fleeting now. So in my opinion, the challenge is what we have not given our young people is the power of concentration, the power of single-minded focus from a very young age. And multitasking is a myth, it's a joke. Like every point that you raised. I've written about it in different leadership contexts, and that's the book which you spoke about. It comes out next month. It's called Leadership Lessons for Daily Living, where it take one single thing like multitasking or living in the present or staying focused on the, taking one work. Vivekananda said it so beautifully. He said, take up one thing and one thing alone, make it your life, dream of it, believe in it, sleep on it, and then there's no way you will fail. But today, there are two challenges. One, the traditional metric of success itself has been narrowly understood. Success is not seen as something much more deeper, much more beautiful, much more, higher than what we all live. I think we got to go back to the time where it's not about distractions, but it's about redefining what is success to us. And in that process of redefinition, we'll actually stay focused. And the second thing that we've missed out is a life lived for others, right? Unless young people understand that. So I tell the youth of today, I don't tell them about service. I think it's a very narrow construct for the youth of today. I talk about, please to go out and have a life, make private gains. But I say qualify it with one sentence. If I had to reinterpret Vivekananda, this is a message of Vivekananda in a reinterpreted packaging I give. I say private gains along with public good. Seek public good, but okay, make private gains. That's what a social enterprise is all about. That's what social business is all about. Nobody's asking you not to make money, but make money and in the process ensure that public good happens, right? Temper yourself with that. Live a world of for benefit. Even ideas of for benefit lives come from that, right? Make sure everybody gets a benefit that he needs to get. In the real understanding of Sarve Jana Sukhino Bhavantu is a for benefit world. Everybody benefits. The small bacteria to the virus to everything benefits. If you had respected that, COVID wouldn't even have happened. The last 10 years, the amount of zoonotic illnesses we got is because we've not been respecting those values in life. So I believe if the young of today, it's not about Vivekananda or his message. It's about the inability of people today to communicate his message in a palatable, contextual, and a relevant way. And if we can do that, I'm very confident. I meet around 100,000 young people around the country, around the world, essentially. And I'm inspired by these young people. Some of their ideas, some of their confidence levels is so high. But I also am saddened by the fact that they have no role models. And these youth are not willing to look at a dead man as a role model. In their opinion, dead, physically dead. Right? They can't see Gandhi or Ramana Maharshi or Aurobindo or Vivekananda or Ramakrishna Paramahamsa living forever. For them, they're dead and gone. And so for them, it's out of the scene. They need some livable experience, somebody they can touch, feel, and talk to in today's world. How many of them are there? Their parents themselves are not role models today. And that being the situation, it's not about Swamiji and this message, but it's about preparing the medium, the people, to be ready for the message. And I think that is where we have failed the youth. And that's what I see as my responsibility. So when I engage with them, when I talk to them, a lot of people whom I mentor, I don't think their average age is more than 27, 28. But that's the fun. That keeps me young. It gives me great energy. But it also gives me an opportunity to tell them that you can live this life. This is not a myth. And in that life, you can seek meaning. And you can actually ensure that you can make private gains for yourself. I have not starved. I have not suffered anything. I never suffered for want of anything. Maybe I attribute my surrender to being provided for. But still, I have not had anything to worry about. Life takes taken care of me very, very well. So seeking private gains in public good is possibly the option of reinterpreting Swamiji's message and living it.
Okay. I think you touched upon your upcoming book. I think there's also a chat message that came up asking specifically about that book. So your upcoming book on leadership, refers to Swamiji and his message several times. Swamiji was a monk, and normally, people don't associate monks with leadership in the traditional sense. I mean, today, I think some of the greatest examples of leaders are actually the monks. So what are your views on this? And what are the specific areas of leadership that you think Swami Vivekananda manifested, which are relevant today?
Answer to the question is my next book. If I write a book on Swami Vivekananda and his leadership, it can't be over a 3-minute talk. But yes, the leadership book that I'm writing has got several references to Vivekananda. In fact, one article is about Swami Vivekananda and his leadership itself. So I'm not going to tell everything. So I'm going to leave something for to the listeners to go read that book. But I believe leadership traditionally has been seen as positions of authority and power. We see them as a CEO, the prime minister of a country, the president of a country, or the head of an organization. We don't see leadership as a means, as a mechanism. If you understand the Gita And if you understand the message of the Gita, and if you see the Gita, Bhagavad Gita through the various Karma Yoga lectures that Swami Vivekananda has given, I think Karma Yoga is leadership in action. To me, leadership is all about action. So I define leadership as leadership is something. It's an activity. It's not about being a leader. I don't think anybody can be a leader. It's about expressing leadership in your life. So it's about mobilizing a group of people or inspiring them for something enormously noble. And like Vivekananda said, a life for others. So I define it, everything's for me from Vivekananda and the Gita in this definition. It's about mobilizing a group of people and their resources for doing something societally constructive amidst enormous uncertainty. You might study for an examination, but you might fail, right? If you're worried about the failure, then you're not doing your action properly. And Bhagavad Gita is so beautiful. He says, focus on the action, on what you have to do here and now. The consequences are mine. The fruits of action are mine. That's a divine thing. To surrender is there in that embedded. Surrender is embedded the way I define leadership. So leadership to me is the activity. It's the Bhagavad Gita. It's the in the Kurukshetra battle. It's the activity of doing something. Doing your dharma, your swadharma, living what your role is demanding at that moment of time. Each of us play a different role at different points of time. At this point of time, I'm just a person being interviewed. That's a role. You're an interviewer. It's a role. Outside, when we both meet each other, we are good friends. That's a different role altogether. So I can be a role of a father to my son. I can be a role of a friend to my son. I can be a role of an angry person to somebody else. There are roles you play in particular context. How well you play that is dharma. That is swadharma. Swadharma is not the way it's defined by all these narrow definitions. Vivekananda defines it so beautifully in this sense. It leads us to believe it this way. So to me, playing your role, giving you 100%, living in the present, not worrying about the fruits of your action, and not about yourself at all, but about the work that needs to be done. It's about the war that has to be fought by Arjuna. It's not about Arjuna fighting the war. Why was Arjuna despondent? Arjuna was despondent because he thought he is a great warrior fighting the war. What nonsense. Krishna puts him in his place and says, it's not about you fighting the war. It's about you as a Kshatriya living your role at that point of time. That's all matters. Go do your role properly. And don't worry about the fruits. It's mine. In that message is the message of leadership. And so to me, this book is all about this kind of extracts. And I hope people will not just read the book. I don't have to worry about marketing the book. People who buy it will buy it, and who read it will read it. But more importantly, if they can try to take messages of this book and live it. What I have tried to do in this book is speak real life incidents, except for a few where like messages relevant to Ramakrishna or Vivekananda or extraordinary monk who inspired me to action. Swami Sureshananji was his name, and he lived in the Ramakrishna Ashram, Mysore. He was if my Adhyatmic Guru was Swami Achalananji, my Vyavaharik Guru was Swami Sureshananji, one of the most finest leadership exponents by living it that I have seen. In fact, I've dedicated my book to him. And what I learned from all these people are these messages. But what I learned were whom we dismiss of as ordinary people, but who are expressing leadership, whether it's a street vendor or an auto driver or a self-help group woman. I had the fortune and the good fortune of being an observer, being with them, learning from them, and putting it together in a book, but bringing out the message, the lesson that we can all learn. And hopefully many of us will be able to live that lesson.
I'll also go and move on to a few questions that came in from people who registered. Some of them are already here. One of those questions is, Dr. Balu, could you please share some example from your work in the social sector on how you adopt particularly the interpretation of Swami Vivekananda's Karma Yoga? It is something that we find difficult to practice. So what is your advice for people like us? That is a question that's come up.
I think I just sort of answered it. Deconstructing Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga is doing your work in the spirit of service. The few words that I mentioned, these are all messages I gleaned from the Karma Yoga, and they're all, in a way, interpretation is what you could say, but it's my interpretation. Giving 100% to what we do at that moment of time allows us to work without the fear of failure that will emerge in the future, or being constrained by the guilt of some past action we've undertaken. It gives us enormous freedom. So operating in freedom in the here and now is something which the Karma Yoga taught me. And that can happen only when you're not worried about the consequences. I'm not saying you should not plan properly, you should not hope to achieve something, but you don't do it to get that something, but you do it because you do it perfectly well. And funnily, you do it perfectly well, the results are actually what you deserve. The second message of what has really helped my life, and these are all things which I can speak easily, but please understand that without making any glorified claims, it's all work in progress for me all my life. These are all not perfect things, perfection points I've reached. These are all work in progress. You remember some, you forget some, you go back and retell yourself this narrative and leave it again. Swamiji says, there's, you will never get what, so something which you deserve can never be taken away from you, and something which you don't deserve can never be given to you. This manifests in many ways. There have been several times when I felt very restless, when I felt very hurt, when I felt very marginalized and sidelined, when I felt I could do so much more. I'm capable of so much more. You know what? There have been absolutely many instances in my life, and I felt, oh, what? I've got so much of knowledge. I've got so much of achievements. I've gone to Harvard. I've done this. I've done that. Those things come in, and they are real. I think those are all opportunities for us to discover the vanities of life, as what Vivekananda said. But they are important for you to experience, because only then can you know what they can do to pull you down. And I've had those moments too, and I keep having those moments, and I keep trying to get over those moments. And to me, that's when I remember so Vivekananda says it so beautifully. What you don't deserve can never be given to you, and what you deserve can never be taken away from you. And once you understand the power of that statement, you suddenly realize, oh my God, I don't deserve it. I might think I deserve it, but I still don't deserve it. And it doesn't look like Karma Yoga at that point of time. But when you sit back and realize, you got lost, is what I would say. And then Karma Yoga is about not thinking that I am the one who's doing it. I keep saying in my leadership work, it's the work at the center that matters, not about you being at the center. And that's the greatest message in the Karma Yoga. It's not about me, but about the work that's getting done through me. And to me, I learned it in a very painful way. If I were to be very open about it, I know you're recording this, but I have no problem sharing what I have lived. Initial days after doing all this work, I started really feeling, oh, wow, I'm doing a lot. You get awards, you get heard about. And there's a situation where the former Chief Minister of Karnataka, Mr. Veerappai Moily, wrote a romanticized version of my biography. And even before I was very well known, he wrote it. Somehow he had got to hear about me, got my stories put together, and he called it Kotta, where he calls me Dr. Balasubramaniam in that, and he describes my life living with the tribals and makes a romanticized version. You start believing that, oh my God, I must be damn good and I must be great. This is a book which he wrote, got translated to so many languages, became a small TV serial, and you got to be known. And suddenly I started believing that, oh, I must be damn good at my job. So without even recognizing it, Swami Vivekananda warns us about it in his talks. But without even recognizing it, you slip into from work that needs to be done to work I have to be seen to be doing. So I got into the same trap. And the way I got woken up was when I was appointed the Vivekananda chair professor the first time. The vice chancellor spoke to me and I agreed. And the first lecture, and the great human being, great Kannada literary figure called Prabhu Shankar, whom I respect a lot. He was the first chair of the Vivekananda chair, and very enlightened soul, a jnani in his own way, great evolution spiritually. First lecture, the hall was full, it was overflowing. He comes up to me, holds my hand and sheds a tear and says, I never heard a lecture on Vivekananda so passionate or so powerful. I never seen a hall so full. Even when I was lecturing on Vivekananda, there would be 5 or 6 people. I could count them, and I would wonder, when will people come to listen about Vivekananda? When he said that, I felt so proud and happy. Oh, wow, I must have really mastered Swami Vivekananda's teaching and talking, the thinking. And as I walked out, it suddenly hit me the very fact I thought that I had lost the complete message of Swami Vivekananda. Because in that one instant of time, I had validated to myself that I was the speaker. It is not what is spoken, but I being the speaker. And I lost all courage. I lost all faith in myself. Those were the worst days of my life. The next 1 month, I never went near the university. I went to the vice chancellor and said, you made the wrong choice. I would like to quit. Now, he was flabbergasted. He said, appointing somebody seems to be an easy job nowadays, but if I have somebody to be remote, it's a bigger job. If you resign, I have to answer to 100 people. Why did you resign? I have to go to the academic council, I have to go to the syndicate, all those bureaucratic processes. So he pleaded with me and said, give yourself a month more if you want. Think about it and come back. That 1 month was a difficult month. My Guru Achalanji used to say about the dark night of the soul. All of us have to go through it. And Swami Vivekananda says, don't stand on a pedestal and say, here, my poor man, take my 5 cents. he writes, and I believe that that sentence was written for me. He had sort of anticipated my problems and wrote it for me. And SPYM's hospitals, schools, etc., are along the bank of the Kabini River. And all our work is surprisingly associated with Kabini in some sense. I started my work in Chinnadagudi Undi, then in Tumnarli, all of them are associated with Kabini River. And he says, all the schools you construct, all the hospitals you build can crumble to dust in one cyclone, in one earthquake, can get washed away in one floods. Don't think you are the doer. Be happy that you are allowed to be the instrument for doing. And I felt he's written to me the sentence. And that is when I really understood his message. So only when you live a life where you live the life of not having those values, will you really appreciate the value of the statement itself. Only when you don't have a luscious, juicy, tasty mango, which you've eaten in the past, will you actually miss the mango. So that's what happened to me. When I understood Swamiji and this message, and when I understood how powerful he was, and when I understood what I was missing, and then realized that living the life of not wanting something for myself, but allowing it to be done through me is far. And I'm not even saying this, saying that I can live this every moment of life. It will be false. It will be a wrong statement to even make a claim like that. I can only say I'm attempting to. You forget. It's okay to forget. That's what the power of the Gita. You have to be more compassionate to yourself. You have to forgive yourself more. That's what the Gita is all about, right? You got to be more clearer. You can't get angry with yourself. You got to reinvigorate and say, well, my tapasya is not good enough. I got to struggle more. I got to do it harder. I got to be more mindful. So the real power of mindful leadership comes to me from the Karma Yoga and from the Bhagavad Gita. So that is how I would see it. A long answer, but I think we have spent our 1 hour.
I don't know. I think the long answer, but I think it answered the first. This answered the first question. I should have phrased. What I can say now is that I actually see you through Swami Vivekananda, because I said, how do you see yourself through him? I think I can just flip it around and say, we can actually see you through Vivekananda, because this is action. I think you've answered that question at great length now in response to this question.
So thank you. I think it's wonderful. We've had such a wonderful number of people here. It was such a pleasure. I can keep talking of Vivekananda. I can never stop talking.
Another 20 minutes to go.
Sorry?
We'll have another 20 minutes to go.
Oh, I thought we had ended 5. I'm sorry. Then if people are ready to listen, I'm ready to talk, because Swamiji is something which gives me the energy.
I think one of the questions that has come is that, what are your views on women's education? How Swami Vivekananda saw not just the education of women, but also their empowerment, and how their contribution is crucial to nation building.
My views are what I interpreted as Vivekananda's words. A lot of people misunderstand him because he's quoted about women and women's involvement in development of society in different contexts. He idolizes the role of Sita, but they were all in context. It's not that he wanted every woman to suffer and just blindly follow Rama. If you actually look at his character, she had such enormous individuality. She could determine what she wanted to do, whether even ending her own life, right? She was not following Rama. She was living a Swadharma in her own way, the role that she had how to perform as a mother or as a wife, as much as Rama had to perform his role as a husband. So I've read critics of Swami Vivekananda's version, but Vivekananda was very, very clear. If I were to distill out his entire thought on womanhood, he says, what? Who are you to say you're going to elevate women? What nonsense are you talking? You just give them the freedom to be themselves and they'll elevate themselves. You don't have to do anything. He says, you are all subjugating women. He's very harsh on the men and says, who the hell are you to talk of elevating women? Who are you? All you got to do is eliminate those barriers that you're put in the way of the women, and they will be the ones who will rise on their own. And that is the world we want. He talks about a world where the mother of the family guides society. That maternal values that he brings in of providing, of succor, of support. It's like a child. A child cries. He doesn't run to the father first. He runs to the mother. There's so much of message embedded in it. You cannot change it. It's not about gender at all. It's a larger construct. It's a much larger societal construct, and we have lost it. If we can just live the world where women can lead us, we can just live the world where enlightened women can take responsibility from the men who are refusing to give it, They have to fight for it today. But if we can just let go of the stupidity that we are the controllers of all action, I think it will be a great place. We have tried in our own small way the Vivekananda Youth Movement. We constantly try. Every time I talk to our HR team, many times I ask them, what is the percentage? Today we are around 43, 44%. We were up to 52% many times. It's not that women should be given special preference, but the structural barriers we have put, we have to eliminate them through other structural mechanisms. So I feel society has to give them the space, not because they have to be provided it with special concessions. It's a space that they rightfully deserve, and it's a space which is good for society itself. For once, that's Vivekananda's thinking. If we can see that Shakti, he's for why others, why would he even pray to that Shakti, right? It's that enormous force. Why would he even permit the Niveditas of the world to flourish the way they did? It is, I think, that spirit of Swamiji and that message of not just equality, but of a greatness which is being suffocated by the men folk. If that is unleashed and let upon the world, I think the world will be a far better place. Just look at it. A small example. Look at the New Zealand's Prime Minister. I've written about her in my book, Ardern's work. In her own small, sweet way, willing to come to Parliament with a newborn baby. But look at the enormous work she's done. I'm not saying she did that work only because she's a woman, but look at the men who are ruling the other countries around the world today and the disastrous consequences of their leadership. If they could just step aside and if more such women come in our own country, there's so many wonderful women doing such wonderful work. If we can give them the space that they rightfully deserve, not even as a special concession. I wish we don't talk about 33% reservation in Parliament. That is meaningless, as though we are giving them a concession. Like Vivekananda says, who the hell are we? If we just take away the barriers to the entry in every position, there's so many women who graduate and study. SLC, the highest number of passing people are women. PUC, the highest of women. The highest number get into degrees. Possibly the highest number of MBAs are women in our country. But you hardly have less than 4% in board positions. Forget CEOs, even in board positions. We have a lot of changes to do. Whether it is sannyasinis or it is board CEOs, more and more women into the fray of societal life. I think that will be a better world. And these were what Vivekananda taught us.
There's one more question that's related, I think, to the pandemic. I think for people here, I think we right at the beginning of the pandemic, we did something called leading in and through a crisis. I think, which was a conversation there where we, rather a webinar where Dr. Balu spoke about what is the kind of leadership that is required to tide over the present crisis. But I think this question is about how do if Swami Vivekananda was alive today, what would he be doing in a pandemic? I think that's the question. How would he be dealing with something like? How do you see him dealing with the crisis? With most leaders, like you mentioned, around the world, struggling with the fundamentals of managing it.
Essentially, he would have been somebody who would have called upon the inner strength of the ability to subsume egos, come up with the inner strength to say that I don't have an answer to this problem. I've never seen it before in my life, so therefore I need more people. So he would have come up and said, well, let me talk to as many people as possible who might know something about how to manage this. I may not have a solution. I might be mandated as a chief minister or prime minister, but he would have had the humility to say, I don't know. Saying I don't know is a quality which very few leaders in this world have. I think that's the greatest leadership quality you can have. Reaching out for help, collaborating with people, accepting, it's a beauty. I will look at it this way. Talking about your inability without making people panic. Talking about your inadequacy of knowing everything, all the data without getting despondency in people. Giving that presence of strength, at the same time telling people we can do it together. Inspiring everybody to say we all are in it together. Today we are not even able to inspire. Look at the solution response of government. The government is acting as though solving the COVID crisis is government's problem. Where have we even involved the people? The people with the problem should be the people with the solution. That is the first mandate of leadership. So if you are really a great leader today, you would have got people engaged in it. It is not by just standing on balconies and lighting lamps alone. It's about being responsible and wearing your mask, practicing social distancing. Why aren't you and I sitting together in the same room? We are just 2 rooms apart. I think it's a sense of responsibility. We wanted to give ourselves 6 feet away. And if I have to not wear the mask and you have to not wear the mask, we have to be alone in the room. And we're doing that. That is a sense of leadership. That That's how comes with humility and acceptance. And today, Vivekananda had been there. He would have initiated all these as processes. We would have all looked at beyond the symbolism. I'm not even disagreeing with the symbolism of what people's participation is, but people's participation is in that action, in that sense of the other. Today's around the world, the problem of spread is mostly because of young people. That's what the literature is now showing us. If the young had been given the message of Swamiji of living for the others, civic responsibility would have been part of the DNA. And then they would have understood that I wearing a mask and I washing the hand is not about protecting myself alone. It's also about protecting the elder persons at home. Most people dying are older, except in India where the age groups are younger. So I believe all these messages we could have gathered from Vivekananda and his message. And if he were alive, he would have been present by not being present. But his absence would have led us inspirationally, and that would have provided presence. That's how a leader should have lived today. Today, every time I switch on the TV and people have discussions about lockdown, your final decision is we leave it to the chief minister. We leave it to the prime minister. Come on, we should leave it to every citizen of the state to practice responsible lockdown on his own, and then everything will happen well. That's a message we all have to learn.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we have about 15 minutes. I'm going to open this up to the audience. What I would request is that a show of hands would be helpful. Otherwise, I'll leave it to you to monitor yourselves in terms of muting. Otherwise, it's very noisy. Another request is also please stick to the topic on hand. I'm seeing messages that are talking about subjects that are outside of the scope of this discussion. So if you could keep it to the Swami Vivekananda and his enduring message, that would be great. So what I'll do is I'm going to unmute everybody. So keep yourselves muted, and only that I think I see first Kumar Shubham, who has raised his hand. So he's going to be asking the first question, and then we'll get this. Yeah. So I think you can unmute yourself and then ask your question.
Okay. Hello, sir.
Hello, Kumar. How are you?
I'm doing good, sir. Sir, so my question is about the idea of the Swami Vivekananda's message of minds like a thunderbolt. When he mentioned muscles of iron and minds like a thunderbolt, what did he mean in terms of youth when he expects certain qualities? What did he mean back then? And what would that message mean right now in terms of the qualities youth will need to have in order to play a meaningful role in building India?
Like I mentioned, the concept of human capital that I understood from Swamiji's message is what I would say when he says muscles of iron and nerves of steel. Swamiji was a great believer in physically growing and taking his message in different ways. I think the youth of today should pay attention, and that's real leadership, to the body, heart, body, mind, and soul. We got to be physically strong. We cannot just, it's not about, physically strong doesn't mean just having muscles and six abs abdomen or whatever young people call it. It's about taking care of your body with the respect that it deserves. Eating the right food, eating in the right quantity, eating not more than what your body needs. I prefer vegetarianism today and say that this is what 6 different colored meals on your plate is what I say, natural colors on your plate. Eat when you're hungry, don't overeat, everything in moderation like the Bhagavad Gita says. Can we practice it? Half an hour of yoga at the least, or at least 1 hour of walking if you can do it. It produces endorphins, promotes the prefrontal cortex. Physically, you're strong. Cognitively, keep learning as much as you can. I know, Kumar, knowing you well, I know that you're already doing a lot of this. I don't know about the physical part because you look so small and tiny that that part I'm not too sure. You must still be healthy. But the cognitive part, keep learning as much as you can. The message in that is not about learning. The message in that is about humility, to tell yourself that I have a lot more to learn. Now, the moment you say I have learned a lot, your journey is over and you stop learning. And that's the arrogance of many of the young people I say today. I go to Harvard, I get an A+, I must be damn good. That's all rubbish. We can never stop ourselves. Like Ramakrishna Paramahamsa said, as long as I live, so long do I learn. That is the cognitive attainment we've got to focus on. We need to grow emotionally. Constantly build your ability to look at intrapersonal and interpersonal intelligences. How do you manage yourself, the internal nature? Interpersonal is the external nature. How do you deal with emotion? So all the context of emotional intelligence that is embedded in our scriptures and in what Vivekananda said, that's the message we got to learn. If you want to exercise leadership, you got to learn to take control of your own selves first. You got to be able to learn to take control of the ecosystems around you in a positive, constructive way. Can you be a positive person? Swamiji said, positivity, positivity, positivity. In fact, he says, if you get up in the morning, and you feel that you're sulking, he says, don't leave the room. You have no business to pull down the other person. Today we talk of mirroring neurons and being emotional activators in others. So if you can't be a positive emotional activator, at least don't be a negative emotional activator, right? So that is emotion. And all this, if you can live your life for the others without expecting anything in return. Today's world has become so transactional. We think I will do something only when I get something in return. Only I will tell I love you to my wife, and my wife will tell back I love you, then everything is okay. If he doesn't say anything, we get worried. Oh my God, what is happening, right? Everything has become transactional. Can we go beyond this and just give of yourself unconditionally, whether it's love or action? I think if young people of today can do this, that will be the real great message of Swamiji's. Life in action for the youth. And I will tell you, there is no way you will fail if you can practice this.
Sanjay, go ahead.
Sir, good evening, sir. I am Sanjay.
Sir.
A very inspiring session, sir, with you. And like I came to know Swami Vivekananda ji much better now. My question is basically because of I'm basically a technology. Coming from the technological background. So today, when we are using so much of technology and creating so much of distractions in social media, and COVID has introduced all this more into materialism, consumerism, e-commerce, and all that. So how do we actually the spirituality? Isn't it that the requirement of spirituality is much more today than because to counter the negative effects of this technology, sir?
I don't believe that, Sanjay. I think every generation has got its share of distractions. It's just that we don't see that way. Evolution constantly demands, if you really believe in controlling internal nature, outside world is not going to distract you. It's not about outside world that is distracting. You're allowing yourself to be distracted, and we got to understand the difference there. Why blame a cell phone and say it distracts me? You can keep the cell phone there and not get distracted by it. You don't have to keep checking it for messages every 3 seconds. Today's research says we spend around 240 minutes in a working day looking at a cell phone. Tell me, many times I forget to bring my phone to office. I don't think the world has ended when I go home in the evening. Maybe there'll be 4 missed calls. Sometimes you feel so worthless, there are only 2 missed calls. You think, wow, nobody's even there to call me today, right? Our sense of identity and affirmation cannot come from the external ecosystem.
Correct, sir.
How we respond to the ecosystem that's going to determine our lives. So instead of blaming those distractions, can I say focused on the inside? And that is there every generation, every point in human existence. Every time there have been distractions, maybe when they're hunter-gatherers, their focus would have been to always watch out for the wild animals coming and eating you. So you're always focusing on the outside. If you can gather your energy and start putting it on the inside, how will the outside matter? So I think let's not use these excuses, Sanjay.
You're right,
Let's
sir.
join them. They are just instruments. They are just instruments which keep changing with every time. Today it's artificial intelligence, machine learning. Maybe tomorrow it's something else. But let's not get carried away by these instruments. Let's stay focused and say that what I do with those instruments is completely up to me. If I don't want to get distracted by it, I will not. If I decide to watch television in the evening, I watch television. It's my choice. I could choose to read a book. It's also my choice. Now, we all make those choices. Make them wisely and don't blame the system for it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. It's very clear now.
I'm not sure what name this is, but it says there are, it looks like an initial BAB. I think you could unmute and ask the question.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Balu, thank you so much once again. As usual, always been inspired. My name is Bharat, by the way.
Thank you.
And I had one question. I think you've answered this question through this hour in various instances while answering various questions. But explicitly, I want to hear about what Swamiji's message would be for overcoming self-doubt. How does one overcome self-doubt in today's fast transactional world?
I think you should be blessed to have self-doubt, Bharat. I would be considering it a great privilege if I'm in self-doubt is not a weakness. Self-doubt is an enormous strength if that inspires you to seek a solution for the doubt. Self-doubt should not incapacitate you, should help you strategize what action should be. So I believe in leadership. This is what I teach my students several times. I say, living in self-doubt is a blessing, but you should not allow the self-doubt to reach a point of paralysis. That is why you must actually be mindfully aware of your self-doubts. If you're not mindful, it can pull you down. It can be a weakness. If you're mindful, you'll use it to channelize it into a self-inquiry. So self-doubt leading to self-inquiry is strength. Self-doubt incapacitating you is weakness. Now, spiritual evolution is transcending self-doubt from weakness to strength, and that is only by self-inquiry. So real spirituality is self-inquiry. So whenever you're in self-doubt, pause. In my language, go to the balcony, be an observer of yourself. Ask yourself, where is the self-doubt coming? Who is that I who's getting these doubts? And start with that question, and you'll suddenly discover enormous power. Not only find the answers, but that particular phase of self-doubt will dissipate and a new self-doubt will come. But you'll have the confidence that that self-doubt is constructive and positive. So don't look down on yourself and give yourself the narrative self-doubt is bad, but convert it into a constructive narrative and say, in this self-doubt, I will discover my capacity to find solutions to my doubts. And that will be so empowering and so very invigorating.
Thank you, Dr. Bal. Is it okay if I ask an attached question to this?
Please do. Namesh is the moderator. I don't control.
Bharat, there are two more. I think it's only fair that I give those two a chance. They already raised their hand.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Lakshmi, go ahead.
So I'll keep my question very crisp. So I came across this word called natural leadership, and since then I always had this doubt whether Swami Vivekananda's qualities of leadership, was it natural, was it innate, and how much percentage of it is molded leadership? Or in general, also I wanted to know among youths or any of us here who wants to build leadership qualities, is it necessary for us to have an innate feeling for the leadership, to have that leadership aspects in us, or can the leadership be trained?
Okay, I'll simplify your question. I generally am a little nervous about the adjectives, though I do use it in my book because that's the context in which I had to write the book. Every one of us who discovers something new, we think we are the only ones who discovered it, and we start using these words: authentic leadership, resilient leadership, emergent leadership. I've used several of those words in my book too. So only the author will know what he meant as natural leadership. So, but I'll reframe your question, and that's appropriate. And if that's what you meant, I presume that's what you meant. Can leadership be taught, or you have to be born with it? Right? Are leaders born, or are leadership can be taught?
Yes, sir. Yes.
I believe leadership you're never born with leadership. Every one of us are born with the potential for leadership. Some of us choose to exercise it. Some of us choose not to exercise it. Now the choice is ours, and we can never be a 24/7 leader. That's a very mistaken concept, right? You are volitional in your choice of leadership. You may choose to be at some points of time. Sometimes you may not. Sometimes I exercise leadership at home. Sometimes my wife exercises it. Sometimes my son exercises it. We all choose to volitionally exercise leadership based on the role that you're expected to play, like I explained, the context in which you operate. So to me, leadership is just simply three things, and the relationship between these three things. It is understanding the self, understanding others around us, and understanding the actions that binds us to the self. And actions are always in context and in roles. So if you can do this, you've understood leadership. And that's what you grow and learn all your life. So you're never born with this knowledge. You cultivate it. And that's why to me, leadership is spirituality in action. The spirituality part is understanding yourself, understanding others around, and the actions that bind you in context, right? And Vivekananda discovered it. Maybe his discovery of the self was hastened by his interaction with Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. And then on, it was a fascinating journey for him. But I believe at every step of the way, Swamiji understood himself, understood others around him, whether in the context of India or in the context of America. That's why if you look at his speeches made in the United States in a different context for a different audience. It's not in a different setting. So leadership expression was different for him, but in India it was different, right? And so they're all has to be seen in those kind of situations. His self, others around him, and the actions he asked them to do, to perform. He could tell a Rockefeller saying that, look at the context in which he spoke to Rockefeller. Rockefeller comes and throws a set of plans of action for him to set up the foundation and says, you must thank me for this. And the context of this was an earlier meeting in which Vivekananda simply ignores Rockefeller and says, make something useful of your life. What you're doing is all rubbish. But then Vivekananda reads the whole thing and then finally tells him, why should I thank you? In fact, you should be the one who thank me, right? That's enormous leadership in that moment of time. Now, that expression comes out only in the context in which he said it. If you were to be said in an Indian context, you'll say how arrogant Swami Vivekananda was. So I think all this, to me, in one line answer, leadership can be learned. And that's exactly my message in my book. Every one of us can exercise leadership, and we need to start the journey.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. I don't think I have heard anything as eye-opening as this today. Thank you so much.
There are a couple of questions that I'll club together and ask. That they've come through chat. One is by Machama, the other is by Sundar. I think both of them are, how do you think schools can inculcate character education and bring Swami Vivekananda and his teachings into the school curriculum and still not be seen through the filter of religion or misunderstood as oriented towards, a particular religion? I think that's the question that,
This is a question in the structure of the Indian education system. So I believe that, like I said, today when you're having leadership which constantly looks at polarizing ideas and thoughts and ideologies, we always see everything from those filters. I believe the best way to bring Vivekananda into the classroom is not by formalizing him as a lesson. Then students will study to pass an examination. The best way to do it is to get our teachers to understand what Swami Vivekananda is. They will live the message of Swamiji, and that's the only way they can translate these contagious ideas of Swamiji. Swamiji says it so beautifully. He says, if I enter you to the pore of your skin, and once I enter you, I can never leave you. So we need to get our teachers' bodies inspired with the message of Swamiji. And different experiments are happening in different parts of the world. I know the Ramakrishna Mission Delhi is trying to do this across the country in Kendra Vidyalaya schools. Different people are doing it in different ways. But please, for heaven's sake, let's not talk about putting him in a textbook. Then we'll lose the message. We'll have the personality, and only the person will be left for us to study and deify or iconify. To me, Vivekananda is God, but I don't deify him. I think the best way to understand his godliness is by trying to live his message. So living his message by teachers is the best way of transacting in a classroom from Vivekananda. I hope this nation understands that Vivekananda doesn't belong to any religion. It was an extraordinary gift that God gave us to India. Let's not only open him, but open him the correct way. Sometimes when you open a gift, we tear the wrapper and just get in a hurry to get into the gift. Let's not do that. Even the wrapper of Swamiji is important. Carefully unpack him. Every layer that we unpack him, we'll understand him differently. Try to live it. Try to spread this message. I think that's the only way to do it. That's my view. I'm not saying that's the only view. There may be better ways of doing it, but I sincerely believe in that. That's why if you look at it, even in our schools and education programs, even within the organization, we have not dogmatized Vivekananda. It is every person's choice to understand him and unpack it at his own pace. And each of us will unpack it at his own pace. I have unpacked it at my pace. Ramesh should unpack it at his pace. Every one of you will unpack him at his own pace. Some of you may decide not to unpack him. That's your call. And that's the way we got to do it. And the second one, what is the second part of the question, Ramesh? I'm sorry, I lost track.
I think it is the second part also. Even within the nation, I think it was Sundar's point being that everybody sees him only through the filter of religion, when he wasn't. I think you answered both questions in that.
That's doing injustice to Swamiji and his message. See him as the fountainhead of spirituality. See him as an intellectual giant who is spiritually immeasurable. And that is Vivekananda for all of us. And once you see him that way, it's irrelevant what religion he represented. As much as he was proud to be a Hindu, I think Hinduism, by very fact of its definition itself, is what he might have meant, and not by the way it's being interpreted today. So I think Swamiji and his message must be understood by mankind as an eternal message, the eternal message of Vedanta itself, an endless eternal message, an opportunity for us to become that divine spirit that Swamiji wanted us to be. He said it so beautifully. He said, I will keep coming back how many ever births if necessary to just remind man that he has to become one with God. I think that is the finality of his message, and we have to travel that journey. So thank you all for this extraordinarily patient listening to me. And thank you, Ramesh, for bringing out Swamiji in a different way. It's always nice to talk about him. And I never knew a free-flowing conversation can be so stimulating, at least to me. And so I'm energized. So thank you again for this. And thank you all for being here today. So I hand it over back to Ramesh if you have any final thoughts to close it up.
No, not at all. I think You shouldn't be thanking me for the opportunity. I think, Aisha, the pleasure was entirely mine, as it was all of theirs as well, I think. And thank you, Dr. Balu. I think this was a fantastic conversation that we've had, something that we've been wanting to do for a long time, and it's happened. And I also want to thank everyone, those of you who joined us on Zoom, those of you who've watched us on YouTube. Thank you very much. And at VLead, I also want to quickly plug VLead as well, and SVYM. We continue to do these conversations. We are also continuing to do a lot of programs, webinars such as these, and also programs, courses, and a lot of these programs that we do, paid courses as well for students, for corporate professionals, for government, and all of that, which look at the entire span of human development, the development sector, leadership, and all of those things. Look forward to your encouragement and participation in each of these. And
I promise, Ramesh, that I'll be sharing some thoughts based on leadership based on the scriptural wisdom of India as conversations. Hopefully, in the coming months, we'll have at least one conversation a month, pick up one scripture which is so full of India's leadership messages, and tell the world that leadership is not a packaged entity which comes from the West, but it is a lived message that comes from the Indian scriptures.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and have a great weekend. And